Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter. Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and welcome back to another video, a rather impromptu video I must say. I wasn't planning on making this. As I'm recording this, I'll be leaving the house in roughly about half an hour to go on holiday for a little bit, so this is very impromptu, but I woke up this morning to be reminded that today is a very special birthday.
Now, today marks 50 years since Ceefax appeared on our screens, the world's first teletext service. Now, does this look familiar?
Today marks the 50th anniversary since the birth of Ceefax, which was the world's first teletext service. Now, if you don't know what Ceefax is, it was this, at the time, quite revolutionary system. It allowed users in a world without internet and stuff like that to use their TV to access information, such as news, sports results, and a whole reft of other stuff as the years went on. You look back now, and obviously it's got that famous, very blocky design. It was often cited as being very slow-moving, but you have to think, back in the 1970s especially, this was probably viewed as revolutionary stuff. And if you take a look at any of the programs from back then, you know, that touched on Ceefax, then they hyped this up immensely.
Ceefax, a name manufactured from seeing facts.
It was mind-blowing. Text on your telly.
Let's try something else. Here's the next.
Well,
shall we
like
try?
to see
What about
Shopper's
the
Guide?
shop? Yes, the shopping guide.
Well, just try one more. Shopper's Guide, which is page 142. And here we go. The pages are going round again. While we're waiting, I must tell you that in a couple of years, this should be much cheaper. And also, price guide, this page is being changed. Just my luck, isn't it?
How unfortunate.
And people were generally excited, and throughout the 70s and in the 80s and 90s, as it became more commonplace, it became a fixture of British TV. Now, as the 2000s came in, and obviously into the 2010s, more people are having decent access to the internet. The old clunky, blocky form of Ceefax is looking very outdated, but it does obviously hold its charm. But all these things can't last forever, and sadly, on the 23rd of October 2012, Ceefax was finally ended for good. So we are well over a decade since Ceefax is over, and we've reached the 50th anniversary milestone since its launch, and I think the love for Ceefax is still as strong as it ever was, quite frankly. You know, there are different groups online of people who reminisce. There are various sites that attempt to recreate Ceefax for the modern day with up-to-date information. And me, myself, I have fond memories of Ceefax as well. I remember being a kid before the children's stuff would start. If I was up really early in the morning and switched on the TV, there would be pages from Ceefax just rolling around on the screen. And I must admit, even though maybe I didn't quite fully understand it at the time, I was fascinated by this very blocky but very brightly coloured system that would display information like the weather and the news. It was, an oddity to witness as a kid. And those who have been on this channel long enough, I actually made a documentary about Ceefax, a little mini video, several years ago, all the way back in 2017, would you believe? At that time, I coincided it with the 5th anniversary since Ceefax shut down, and it still remains one of my most popular videos here on the channel, so if that's one you haven't watched, particularly newer viewers who might not be familiar with the older stuff, you can go and check that out. Now, am I completely happy with that video? No. I mean, I did make it in 2017. It was before I had like a decent microphone. It was before I feel I'd really learnt a lot of my skills in regards to editing and piecing together like the narrative and stuff like that. But what's nice to see is when I actually do read the comments for that video, there's a lot of love there. And not just for the video itself, but there's a lot of love still for Ceefax. I do see lots of groups now saying, oh, Ceefax needs to come back. You know, Ceefax does have a place. Does it, though? Does it really? I mean, outside of it being a novelty and, something nice to look back on, I really can't see it returning in, like, the current TV landscape, if you will. It's just, what's it going to do? What is it really going to do coming back now? Do you know what I mean? The BBC themselves did an article talking about the 50th anniversary. Today, people take interactive television and news on demand for granted, but their origins goes back to 1974 when the BBC launched Ceefax. The service eventually attracted 22 million users, with its mix of sport, news, recipes, features, quizzes, and TV and radio listings until the internet killed it off. That's right, it was it offered a whole lot in the end, and 22 million users, would have this in their TV. When I say it became a staple, it truly did. Even I remember growing up in the 2000s, and you were out in public places, people were still using Ceefax to catch up on sports results, for example. This was before you could just go on your phone and Google it. Ceefax was unique at the time. When a story broke, you didn't have to wait until the next bulletin. You'd go to Ceefax and get the story when you wanted it, not when the schedulers wanted it, said Ian Morton-Smith, one of its first journalists. And maybe you could argue Ceefax was the very first ahead of its time early step into the sort of schedule-free age of television that we live in now. In a world where traditional TV is trying to cling on to its scheduled format, wanting people to watch programs when they want, we're increasingly seeing more and more different channels, different streaming companies offering you can watch all this content whenever you like, which of course is more convenient for people. That's taking off. Ceefax may not have offered full-on programs, but it certainly offered that informational freedom. Like the journalist said, back then if you wanted to see the news, you either had to watch it like the 1 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news, stuff like that. But with Ceefax, you could tune into the news whenever you like and get breaking news stories often before they'd even show on television. Its 50th anniversary is being marked by a 2-day event at the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge, attended by former Ceefax, Oracle, Foretel, and TELETEXT Ltd employees, as well as enthusiasts and TELETEXT artists. Wow, okay, so this is a big deal then. There's going to be lots of people there. Shame I didn't know about that. I would have tried to have made it myself.
Centre for Computing History in Cambridge, where TELETEXT fans and pioneers have been celebrating its anniversary. Cutting the cake, Ian Morton-Smith.
Early morning, when the first Ceefax newsman, Chief Sub-Editor Ian Morton-Smith, arrives for duty.
I was there at the beginning, watched it grow. I think there were 4 sets when Ceefax first started that were equipped to receive the signal. And by the time I left, there were 22 million viewers.
We started working on the 6th floor of TV Centre and had all these news services like routers and PA, and our job was to pick up stories and write them up for Ceefax, said Mr. Morton-Smith, known as Mort Smith to colleagues, who lives in Suffolk. When we'd finished creating a page, we pushed a button and out came a yellow punch tape. So we'd grab it and run downstairs to the central apparatus room, feed the tape into the machine, push the button, and it was live. Just like that, just as primitive as that. Now, I think as time went on, they could just do it via computers and they can make updates and stuff. But, this was telly back then. If when we went back upstairs we saw a spelling mistake on screen, we had to do it all over again. God, could you imagine? He said it taught him how to write in a disciplined way with only 80 words to tell a story. He went on to develop teletext services in the USA and for Channel 4 after leaving the BBC in 1981. And that is to remember, Ceefax was a world first at the time, particularly in 1974. It was the BBC's baby, but obviously others created their own versions. ITV famously had Oracle, Channel 4 had Foretel, or, Channel 4 Teletext, if you will. And services did launch in the USA too, although from my understanding they weren't as successful as they were over here in the UK. In the UK, they persisted for a long time. And look at this little clip. Oh, bingo, man. Created a bingo competition and co-created Christmas quizzes. How on earth do you play bingo on Ceefax, man? I'd love to know that. But look at that. Simpler times, eh? Simpler times. Ceefax was developed by BBC broadcast engineers out of a desire to provide subtitles for viewers with impaired hearing. They found that a normal television picture of 625 lines had spare lines at the top of the picture, which could be used to transmit words or numbers. So, a really valiant cause. There are several people out there who are hearing impaired, who aren't able to enjoy television in the way that most people do. So back then, subtitles, again, these days, feeding in subtitles to a program, even live subtitles, is relatively straightforward. But you got to think, back then, this was a whole different ball game in terms of technology. So to create a system that offered those subtitles would have been, a lifeline for those in that community. There were initially only 4 Ceefax-enabled TVs, and one belonged to the service's first manager, Colin McIntyre. Mr. Morton-Smith said, when we first started, Colin was working all hours, so he was always running late to get home. So he got in the habit of using a back page on Ceefax to say to Field, his wife, I'm just leaving home in 40 minutes. Oh, that is fun. The BBC pulled the plug on the service in 2012, but it has continued to attract enthusiasts, including Jason Robertson, who's a teletext archaeologist, that's a great title, from Congleton, Cheshire. At about that time, fellow enthusiast Alistair Buxton that it was possible to rescue teletext pages from domestic videotapes used to record TV programs. Now, if that's true, that is going to be a great form for archiving. Mr. Robertson, who's 53, described it as VHS skip diving and added, "We thought that was the end of it, but when we realised we could recover teletext, the medium was democratised, with people doing their own thing." For him, the appeal of teletext is partly nostalgic and partly what can be done with it today.
It's a fascinating insight into the past.
Why do this? Why archive all these old pages?
I mean, we've got newspaper archives, there's loads of those. Why not a teletext archive as well? Because the good thing about teletext, of course, is it's impartial. Newspaper archives can be quite partisan, but Ceefax has to just tell the facts.
It also attracts artists who like the big, bold, colourful graphics. Well, yeah, I mean, yes, it has its charm. It's very of its time, but there is an appeal of that time, that great, big, blocky text, that very early 1970s sort of style that you'd also see replicated in various video games and early home computers. "I'm from the 1970s and we had newspapers and print," he said. "When teletext came along, it was just incredible. Instead of just staring at the TV passively, we could pick up the remote control and dial up whatever we wanted to see." That's the mindset you've got to put yourself in, man. It really is. And Block Party Teletext 50, that was at the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge on Saturday and Sunday. So I believe that event has already happened. The time I'm recording this, it's on a Monday. I think it's the weekend just passed. So it's a shame in a way, because again, had I known, it would have been cool to have gone down to experience it, to just check it out for what it was. But doesn't that tell you just how much Ceefax is loved? The fact that there's a whole event, yes, dedicated to teletext as a whole, but Ceefax is the one that started it all 50 years ago, back in 1974. I am amazed the BBC stuck with it for so long, until 2012, because they could have easily discontinued it, you know, at least 5 years earlier, if not before that as well.
You controlled access to the information. That's what made Ceefax special. And then, of course, along came the internet and killed it stone dead.
And again, now people who are sourcing Ceefax teletext from VHS tapes, I genuinely thought that wasn't possible, but if they're saying there's a way to do that, to pull these pages from VHS tapes, then this is a whole new potential world of archiving we've got unlocked here, which is only a good thing for the TV scene. I've got really positive memories of Ceefax for the time I was exposed to it again throughout the 2000s. It would have been cool to experience it during that heyday back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but I'm sure some of you out there might have done and have those memories, and if you do, please let me know them all in the comments down below. That is all for this video, really. As I say, I'm about to go on holiday. This was a really last-minute thing, but, you know, 50 years, it's a huge milestone, and even though it hasn't been around for about 12 of them, Ceefax is still this crucially important part of UK TV culture, so it only seemed right that we take some time out to celebrate it. If you enjoyed the video, go and leave a like on it, and like I said, leave your comments, leave your Ceefax memories down below. As mentioned before, if you haven't seen my documentary on Ceefax that I made some years ago, go and check that out as well. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new here, and in the meantime, I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.
But when it began, Ceefax seemed to be paving the way to a digital future.
Chess, bridge, crossword puzzles and many other games appeared to lend themselves to the format of the television screen. And looking even further ahead, there's the really exciting possibility of using a domestic television receiver as a home computer terminal. Far-fetched? Well, hardly. After all, it's not so very long ago I discovered that by doing this, I get that.
The good ship Ceefax, pioneering, popular, but swept aside by the tides of technology.
Thank you to our patrons for helping to support the show, and a special thank you to Macra, Bruce Danton, Derek Chambers, Shaun Knock, Daud Khan, Liam De-Maine, Trev Hughes, Ajmac 200017, Deck, Evan Hart 41, Jen, Traffy, Tim Ripley, Mr. Eurovision 1986, Ted Elliott, Marnanel Thurman, John Wakefield, Kieran Bolton, and 40-something Manchild, our AMTV staff members.